has a way of putting us on a pause, not as a punishment, but as invitation. An invitation to sit still, to listen, to grieve what's shifting, and to meet ourselves again, but differently. Listeners, today's guest, Jessica D. Ray, knows this deeply. A powerhouse in real estate, a devoted stepmom, and a woman navigating the beautiful and brutal edges of personal transformation. After facing surgery, a move, and the unraveling of a 5 year relationship, Jessica found herself in a space where old ways of coping no longer worked. And she had no choice but to be still. In this raw and beautiful conversation on the mindful living with me, host Sana, we'll be exploring how stillness can be a portal to clarity, how identifying shifts when roles change, and how we find ourselves not despite the chaos, but within it. Listeners, Jessica's story isn't just about endings, it's about rediscovery, rebuilding, and the quiet power that lives in surrendering to life's in between spaces. So let's quickly dive in. And Jessica, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really honored and excited to have you here with us.
Well, thank you. I'm really honored to be here with you and to be sharing my story. Hopefully, it could help someone in need.
Absolutely. Um, Jessica, while I was reading out your intro, um, I could say that you went through what could be a perfect storm. Um, a surgery, a move, and then the end of a relationship. And it can be, I don't know to what fathoms, but it can be really, really hard, um, all at once. So, can you take us into the moment when everything collided, if it's okay with you? And what was your initial emotional and mental state as life paused so abruptly?
You know what? It's funny because, in the moment, and especially as a woman, I find women, we are just a bit more proactive when certain things happened, especially when it comes to survival, right? I think that with my previous relationship, I had to leave the home I was in. I had to leave, the role of being a stepmom and quickly doing so. And I just went into survival mode where I just tuned everything out and made sure that I got out and, found another place and, just was on a different path to getting out of that relationship because it was something that I had to do for myself. And for the other person as well. In that moment, I couldn't really see that far ahead of me because I didn't take the time to be still and pause and really understand the emotions and the changes that I was going through. And it's funny because life will always, you know, you can call it a higher power, you can call it God, whatever, you believe in, but will throw a wrench into the whole situation and it almost force you to stop. And that is how I ended up breaking my kneecap at work. And that allowed me to really fully be still for almost 2.5 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, in that moment, when this all happened, I think that's when I really had to fully engage with my thoughts, my feelings, and then that's when you start questioning everything.
So, first of all, Jessica, thank you for sharing that. And secondly, in those 2.5 months of stillness, um, did you realize that something within you, maybe the belief system you had, or the perspective, or the outlook of life you had, completely changed? Or something surprising that you found out about yourself and the prevailing circumstances?
Yes. You know, you start, y- when you really are. when you have no choice but to not move at all, you stay stagnant, and that's when emotions and feelings come really, they're steady and they're still. You almost have to filter out what's negative, what's positive, and what's playing almost tricks on you. What I found is that my old ways were no longer serving me. And maybe that's why I had needed to take a pause and really think through what it is that I really want out of this next chapter of my life. What can I do different in this next chapter of my life? And come to terms with what's really going on. And sometimes we blame ourselves for certain things not working out. And I almost had to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, you know, what are my values and what am I true towards, and who am I really at this stage in life? So I truly believe that having that stillness really was able for me to look at how I wanted to be that better version of myself. And that's when I started to dive deep into, looking at um, what I was consuming. So instead of staying still and, endlessly scrolling, I decided to maybe pick up the book I decided to never read before, or, challenge myself to doing some brain work and, cognition, looking into cognitive health, excuse me, and really just started being more optimistic as to, okay, what can I really change to be at the next level
Mm,
in all areas?
yeah, yeah. But did you initially resist that stillness? Because, when suddenly our routines change, and especially when we are completely on pause, it can really take us down a rabbit hole, feeling frustrated and angry with ourselves, that or maybe the higher power, the God, that, why did you do this to me? Questions like this, what I have done wrong, or why did I do that? Did you initially resist that?
Yes, and you nailed it on the head, as they say, because I questioned him every day. I remember crying for the first few days when I got, the initial diagnosis, not diagnosis, but the initial, doctor's information saying like, "Okay, you have to go into surgery as soon as possible," and it was my first surgery ever, so I was very scared. I've never gone under the knife, and, you always have this notion that, "Okay, this is the end of my life." But yes, I was questioning every day, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why, you know, why now too? Because I was going through so much. And I think I was with a family member and they said, stop questioning. You'll never know the answer. And it's on his terms and his timing. And there's a lesson within this. And that made me realize like that they were absolutely right. And I kind of had to go with the flow of things. But yes, I definitely resisted. I almost didn't even want to, how do I say this? I just was at one point I just disassociated because I was like, this is too much. This is just way too much. And yeah, for a good maybe first 2 weeks, I completely disassociated from everything around me because I just, I was tired.
Yeah, I can make sense of that. Even if something in my life, wasn't as physical as this is, but sudden change of events, people around you changing, or sudden changes in relationships, especially, during pandemic or after pandemic, the layoffs, um, those life-changing events can really make or break you, can really make or break you. And now when I look, or I try to do a bit of self-introspection, I really feel that gratitude, and I'm thankful that I got to experience that. Unfortunately or fortunately, but I learned so much from those life changing events. They open new doors for me, new ways for me, kind of reinventing myself. And seems like it did something similar for you as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? After the initial thought process of, playing that victim mentality, almost like, why me? Why is this happening to me?
Mhm.
Unquestioning everything, you almost have to, first of all, be grateful that you are still alive. And, you almost have to think of other people's positions where they're wanting to be in your position. There's far worse things out there. And so you have to be mindful of that as well, too. People always say, spend one day in the hospital and come back to me, and you get to see a whole new perspective. So, just being mindful of certain things. I took the chance of, I have a gratitude journal. So making sure that I stuck with those daily non negotiables and habits to really ensure that I kept being mindful and grateful every day, despite all of this. And knowing that I was back to being a caterpillar and I was going to possibly blossom into a new butterfly at some point.
Yeah, I know. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Uh, skeptics or people may associate that with some kind of blind positivity, but it is what it is. And to someone who has experienced through this or is experiencing, it's not the end of your life or end of the world.
Exactly, and I think it's hard to think that when you're going through so many life changes, but you always have to believe that through adversity, there's something on the other side. You don't know what it is yet, but there is something. And if you think back about, upon your life, you've gone through many other things before, and look where you are today.
Absolutely. And Jessica, this is something I would love to know from you that you are now rebuilding, the caterpillar to butterfly journey professionally, personally, emotionally. So as you step into this new chapter, how has your definition of success, love, or fulfillment shifted?
It's funny because I really analyzed these things and I said, okay, what are my priorities right now? For now, love is off the table
Yeah.
until I rebuild myself. But it's, and I almost thought the other day, I said, how much rebuilding can one person do? you know? And I think it's just, I kind of switched that and said, life is, a constant rebuilding of yourself. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to achieve that 100, but at least, you get to work at it every day. That's the blessing in all of this. So right now the focus isn't love towards, finding a mate. It's more loving myself and loving my relationships with my friends and my family more so. I think love with oneself is at the top of that list. And that's why I kind of focused on doing more therapy, not just the physical therapy, but the therapy on the mind as well, so that I can become more resilient and stronger mentally to overcome a lot of the things that can come my way, and also old patterns and behaviors that I might still have lingering on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is really, really encouraging, empowering, Jessica. Um, and before we wrap up, um, a bit of a more nuanced and a flipped uh, perspective. There's also a narrative that strength means bouncing back quickly, which I don't agree. Everybody has their own time to bounce back. And this pressure of bouncing back quickly can really sometimes be detrimental. Do you feel there's a pressure as a businesswoman, a mother, a figure, a leader to be always be okay for everyone else? And how do you navigate that without betraying your own emotional truth?
I've been betraying my own emotional truth for a very long time. I always say I care so much about others, and I sometimes fill other people's cup before mine, and which is not good. You have to fill in your own cup daily, and as much as we think that we are definitely not, and I can guarantee that. So, to answer your question, bouncing back for me, and I just experienced this now because, I got the clean bill of health. You can go back to walking again and driving. And it quickly went, full force and said, okay, I'm going to walk my 5,000 steps and then I'll go up to 10,000 steps. And I quickly started realizing my knee was just not having it. And that made me go, okay, no, let's start back again. Let's go with teenier, tinier steps. And those teeny, tiny steps will lead to the bigger steps. It's just a matter of time. I can't dive right in without fully taking a step. So I think bouncing back, people think like, yes, I'm back. Let me go full in, full force. But sometimes it's also with time and patience that you need to come back at your 100% best self.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Jessica. And finally, if our listeners, they would like to connect with you, what will be the best way to do that?
They can follow me on Instagram at Jessica Dire. Dire is the last name. And same thing on Facebook and LinkedIn, if ever.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to mention all the links and handles in the show notes for our listeners. And Jessica, thank you so much for this such a tender, powerful conversation, sharing this part of your journey. And it definitely resonated with me because this is what I believe, that sometimes life removes our usual anchors, not to drown us, but to teach us how to float in unfamiliar waters. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me and thank you for, allowing to share my story.
And to all the listeners out there, or to anyone listening who feels like life has hit pause, may Jessica's story remind you clarity is born in stillness, courage grows in surrender, and your next chapter doesn't require you to have it all figured out, just to be willing to keep unfolding. Until next time, stay curious, stay gentle, keep walking your mindful journey. Make sure to connect with Jessica. Refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And thank you so much to everyone for being a part of the mindful journey. Until then, this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.